Gihon, former senior attorney at ICE and also an attorney here in Central Florida right now. Let's talk about this. Republicans claim that this is just political. It's a way to get 5 million, who knows what the number is, 5 million more Democratic voters, and that's why the president did that. Do you agree with that?
I do agree that the president's motives are political. However, the 5 million people who will benefit from this, not only are they not going to become citizens because of this, they're not going to obtain green cards because of this either. They're simply going to be put in this kind of limbo status where you're not legal, but you're not illegal. We're going to leave you alone. And so that's part of the problem, is that you're creating this whole underclass of individuals and hoping that someday somebody will roll up their sleeves and solve the problem.
So it's kind of opposite of what you hear on talk radio and other places these days, where all of a million you have 5 million new Democratic voters. That's not the case.
That's not the case.
Okay.
Because of this action.
Okay. President also said that previous presidents have done exactly what he did. Is there a difference in what previous presidents have done?
Yes, there's a difference in 2 major ways. First of all, the scale that we're talking about here is totally different. Second of all, the presidents who have done this in the past have done this in conjunction with Congress, have done this as a supplement to bills and laws that were passed by Congress. So if you're talking about President Reagan and President George H.W. Bush, they had massive immigration reform in the 1980s, and there were some loopholes that needed to be filled in. And so you had both sides of Congress and both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, pass a bill, and then the president came in and said, listen, you guys missed some stuff. Instead of passing another bill, I'll fill in the gaps with executive action. And between the 2 presidents, we're only talking in executive action that affected, roughly 3 million people. What President Obama is doing is acting before Congress acts and acting to force Congress's hand, which is totally different, and he's doing it on the scale that more than doubles what we're talking about has been done in the past.
All right, let's talk about some of the numbers here, some of the claims out there, and you were on the front lines of this for years. The president says we have more agents along the southern border than at any time in history. Is that true?
That is true. But again, this is a instance of President Obama taking credit where credit isn't necessarily due. 2004, when Congress created the Department of Homeland Security, they funded a whole lot of programs on the southwest border to increase troops. And we saw it. It ramped up between 2004 and 2008. They more than doubled the number of agents who are on the southwest border. From 2008 through today, another 6 years, we only had a slight increase in the number of troops and agents who are at the border. So President Obama hasn't decreased the number of agents at the border, but he certainly can't take credit for increasing the numbers to where they are today.
From what you've seen, is it possible to seal the southern border?
No. No, as long as you have an incentive, and whether that is the drug smuggling units or the weapons coming over the border or the human traffickers or the terrorists, as long as there's a will, there will be a way for people to illegally cross from Mexico into the United States.
Let's talk about that quickly, too. I was going to have that in our third segment today, but you brought it up. There are a lot of concerns about terrorists coming into the United States, either through the southern border or the northern border with Canada. A lot of people say just build fences all along the way. That's impossible, right? There's no way to seal those off. So is there a solution?
The solution is to put as much money as you possibly can into securing the southern border to reduce the number of people who are coming over. If you make it extremely, extremely difficult, time-consuming, and costly to pay a smuggler and to come over the southern border, it will reduce the number of people who are coming in. You will never be able to stop it. And so when we have an instance like we had Secretary Johnson testified, on September 10th, the Border Patrol caught 4 men from the Middle East who were members of a designated terrorist organization, PKK. This is a group the Department of State has designated as a bunch of terrorists. We caught those people coming over the southern border. And so it's not just a family units coming over to escape poverty and to escape violence in Central America. It's not just a bunch of good people who are trying to come into the country and contribute. We have drug smugglers, weapon smugglers, we have aggravated felons, we have terrorists. Those are all people coming over that southwest border.
The president also claims illegal border crossings have been cut in half. What are the facts with those numbers?
The president is right about that. The numbers absolutely bear that out. But it's
why is that? Is it a recovering economy in Mexico? Not as good here? Not as many jobs? What is it?
The numbers that I have looked at and studied over the years have shown us that the number of illegal border crossings, the way we measure it is, if we catch less people coming across the border, that means the total number of people coming must be less, because you can never count how many people you don't catch. You simply don't know. And so if you count it by the number of people we do catch, it has decreased continuously since 2006 up till 2012. And it was decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. And that coincided with the housing industry really tailing off and then going into a tailspin, and also the U.S. economy decreasing. And so the president, again, hasn't contributed to it except for the 2012 through the present, where we have, again, an uptick of people crossing the southern border. And again, a big contribution to that I believe, and a lot of my colleagues when I work with ICE believe, was the DACA program, the Deferred Action Program. Again, a great goal, but it did create an incentive for people to come illegally.
What about deportations? How do those stack up with what we've seen in the past?
The president likes to call himself, but also says, I don't want to be the deporter-in-chief. The way that has worked out over time is, even though the number of people crossing the southwest border has decreased, the way the president, under his administration, has treated them has changed. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but instead of catching people and in a quick, efficient, and less time-consuming fashion, turning them around and sending them right back to Mexico, the president has made a much more formalized process, and he's used something called expedited removal and reinstatement of removal, which are great programs, but they're also more costly, more time-consuming, and a lot of times lead to detention costs and people getting released into the United States who should have just been turned around and sent away. So the number of formal deportations at the border has increased under the president. But what's important to remember is the number of deportations from the interior of the country have dropped dramatically. The president took over in 2008. 250,000 people were identified, detained, and removed from the interior of the United States by ICE. That is Enforcement and Removal Operations, Homeland Security, and the like. When the most recent numbers we have from 2013 show a drop down to 140,000. And so that's what I did on a regular basis in immigration court, and we saw the numbers plummet from the number of people who were being ordered removed, and certainly the numbers who were being actually removed from the interior of the United States have gone down dramatically under the president.
All right. Would the economy collapse if illegal immigrants were all rounded up and sent home? We're going to talk about that coming up next here on Orlando Matters.